Désolé. Bon, alors bienvenue. Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Comme vous voyez, c'est une petite révolution que nous sommes en train de lancer aujourd'hui. Pour la première fois, notre rendez-vous de presse va avoir lieu de manière non seulement virtuelle, mais aussi, je l'espère, interactive avec l'ensemble des journalistes des journalistes accrédités auprès des institutions européennes qui se seront connectés par le biais de notre application. C'est un pas très significatif pour nous, donc je voudrais prendre quelques minutes, si vous voulez bien, pour vous expliquer cela en détail. Donc, vous savez que dans un premier temps, notre priorité a été d'assurer la continuité du service en vous proposant un rendez-vous quotidien, mais que, étant donné que nous n'avions pas trouvé de solution interactive qui correspondait à tous les critères que nous avions et que nous ne savions pas comment la situation allait évoluer, nous avons mis en place un système assez rudimentaire basé sur l'envoi de questions par écrit à une boîte mail. Ce système a fonctionné plusieurs semaines et je pense qu'il a donné satisfaction en ce sens qu'il nous a permis de répondre à de très nombreuses questions de la part d'un groupe très large de journalistes. Mais il est évident qu'il ne correspondait pas au genre d'échange naturel que nous souhaitons avoir avec les journalistes dans le cadre de notre rendez-vous de presse quotidien. Et nous avons donc cherché une solution qui nous permette justement d'interagir avec vous de manière quasi identique à celle que nous aurions si vous étiez en salle de presse, tout en sachant qu'il fallait que ce système réponde à un certain nombre de critères bien précis et notamment qu'il soit validé au niveau sécurité par notre direction informatique. Deuxièmement, que nous puissions le limiter aux seuls journalistes accrédités auprès des institutions européennes, que nous puissions continuer à transmettre sur EBS et que nous puissions continuer à organiser le rendez-vous de midi par thème, étant donné que, comme vous le savez, nous diffusons ensuite des clips sur les différents sujets qui ont été traités lors du rendez-vous de midi. Et donc, il nous a fallu un petit peu de temps pour trouver le système et le tester. Et donc, aujourd'hui, pour la première fois, nous allons essayer de le faire fonctionner en direct. Alors, quelques petits détails, et je vais le répéter en anglais. Vous êtes inscrit à cette conférence virtuelle pour l'instant en tant que participant, c'est-à-dire que vous pouvez m'entendre et vous pourrez entendre les porte-paroles qui répondront aux questions, mais vous n'avez pas accès à votre microphone. Ce que vous devez faire lorsque vous souhaitez prendre la parole, c'est appuyer sur le bouton « Raise Hand » qui se situe dans l'application. Je vois que certains d'entre vous l'ont déjà trouvé. Je vois, moi, la liste de toutes les personnes qui lèvent la main, comme si vous étiez en salle de presse, et je choisis un journaliste. Un de mes collègues vous donne alors techniquement la parole, et c'est à ce moment-là que vous pouvez appuyer sur votre micro et aussi enclencher la vidéo. Une fois que vous avez posé votre question, votre micro est de nouveau coupé. Cela permet au porte-parole ou à moi-même de vous répondre. Si vous voulez faire un follow-up, appuyez s'il vous plaît de nouveau sur Raise Hand. Voilà. I will repeat this in English because one of the slight issues that we have with the system is that we cannot have translation through the app. We have translation through EBS, but there is a 40-second time lag between broadcasting through EBS and our actual exchanges on the app. So if you ask a question in English, you will get an answer in English, and that's what you will hear through the app. If you ask a question in French, you will get it in French through the app, and later the interpretation in English or French on EBS. So once again, technically speaking, journalists who have connected to the system are connected as invitees. If you want to ask a question, you need to push the little raise hand button. The explanations were given to you in the technical documentation that we sent with the invitation. One of my colleagues will then transfer to you the right to ask a question, and when I see that you have the floor, you will be able to press your microphone button. You can also press your video button so that we can see you and ask your question. If after that you have a follow-up, you need to push the raise hand button again. So today being the first day, I'm sure we will have some technical issues to solve, and I count on your goodwill and your patience with us. Our objective is to try to improve the way this works. Today is a very important day for that, and see how until the end of the week we can come hopefully to a rather seamless operation. If I look at the list, I have 94 people connected to the system, which means that many of you have managed to connect, which means that this is as if we had a quite full press room here. And this is where I need to make a second comment, which is that we have agreed with API that we will be limiting, broadly speaking, the question and answer session of the midday briefing to an hour. Because we could have potentially hundreds of connected journalists, and if everybody wants to ask a question, we could spend the whole day here, and as obviously you understand, there are many other things that need to take place, and also bilateral contacts with colleagues. So we will take questions for roughly 1 hour, and that means that the more follow-ups that are given to any specific journalist on a specific issue, the less other journalists will have the opportunity to ask questions. Clearly, we'll be as helpful as we can in managing the process, but we will need to make sure that we can limit the midday briefing to something that remains manageable for all of us. Also because for you, having a press briefing that lasts for 2 hours every day would not be manageable in terms of your workload. So, that being said, let me now move to the announcements. La première annonce, c'est que la présidente de la Commission européenne, Madame von der Leyen, descendra ici demain en salle de presse. Elle aura donc aussi l'occasion de tester ce système avec nous, afin de faire le point sur la réponse de la Commission à la crise du coronavirus et de préparer avec vous les prochaines étapes, de répondre à vos questions sur ce sujet. Et cette conférence de presse sera suivie d'un briefing technique off the record, qui sera donc accessible uniquement par le biais de l'application, plus précisément sur la feuille de route de sortie des mesures de restriction qui a été annoncée par la Commission et qui sera adoptée demain dans le courant de la matinée. Donc, conférence de presse de la présidente à 11h du matin, on the record, sur EBS, suivi par un briefing technique off the record sur le sujet de la feuille de route. That being said, we're now going to test the system immediately, and I would like to pass the floor to Ariana, who has announcements to make on the latest state aid decisions. Jonathan, does Ariana have the floor?
Hello,
Ariana.
can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Great. Good morning, everyone. So, as I already had the occasion to say on the podium on the 19th of March of this year, the Commission has adopted a temporary framework to enable member states to use the full flexibility provided under stated rules in order to support the economy in the context of the coronavirus outbreak. Its scope was further extended on 3rd April 2020. Last week, the Commission has started consulting member states on a proposal to further extend the scope of the temporary framework by enabling them to provide capital support to companies in need. Since public interventions of this type with state aid may have such an impact on competition in a single market, they should remain measures of last resort. They will also be subject to clear conditions as regards the state's entry, remuneration, and exit from companies concerned, strict governance provisions, and appropriate measures to limit potential distortions of competition. As of today, the Commission has taken 54 decisions approving 66 national measures notified by 22 different member states and the UK, worth several hundred billions of euros. As you will know, there are press releases for all these decisions available online. Amongst the most recently approved ones that member states have notified to support businesses affected by the coronavirus outbreak, there is an Italian guarantee scheme of up to 200 billion euro to support the economy, a Belgian scheme deferring payment by Charleroi and Liège airports of concession fees to mitigate the economic impact of the coronavirus outbreak, and a 3.3 billion euro Romanian scheme to support SMEs. We have also approved trade credit insurance guarantee schemes in France and in Germany to enable companies to continue benefit from insurance on domestic trade in this difficult times. The Commission is in contact with member states concerning possible support measures in the context of the coronavirus outbreak. And as I already have said, in general, the Commission will assess possible national support measures by member states linked to the consequences of the outbreak as a matter of priority.
Okay, thank you very much, Ariana. I hope that this was clearly understandable to everybody listening through the app. Here the sound was okay, but I think we can improve a bit, perhaps by using a headset. We will discuss that later. Let me now call Vivian for an announcement on waste management.
Thank you very much and good afternoon. Today the Commission is presenting guidelines on waste management in the coronavirus crisis. Proper waste management, including separate collection and recycling of waste, are of course necessary services for our society. And the continuity in providing those services also during the current crisis is important for our health, for our environment and for the economy. And the Commission has been working and continues to work very closely on this with the member states and the stakeholders, the waste management operators across the EU. And we have prepared these guidelines to support them in their challenging tasks. And more information on this in our daily news.
Okay, thank you very much. So now I would also like to make one last announcement. There is currently ongoing a video conference of education ministers, and there will be an online press conference around 12:30, so in a quarter of an hour. And with that, we're ready to move to your questions. So I see that Dave Keating has asked for the floor. So we are going to shift you. Voila. So Dave, you have the floor. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, perfect. Yes.
Fantastic. Good. I'm the first one. So I want to ask about the lockdown guidance to be issued tomorrow. Two questions on that. We still have 24 hours to go between now and when that will be adopted. Are you discouraging member states from coming out with national plans in the meantime before that's adopted? And related question, yesterday in the United States, we saw groups of states going with their own regional lockdown exit strategies rather than going with the federal government strategy or any federal government strategy. Do you advise groups of EU member states to pursue this same strategy? For instance, Italy and Spain and France banding together for a regional exit strategy. Would that be a good idea in the Commission's view?
Okay, thank you very much, Dave. Very happy that you got the very first question under our new system. On your first question, we have always said that it is up to member states, it is their prerogative to determine when they want to take restrictive measures and when they want to move out of restrictive measures. What we have been working on over the past weeks is a roadmap with recommendations to ensure that when they start to move out of these restrictive measures, they do so in a manner which is effective, including and in particular taking into account, obviously, the situation in other EU countries, and indeed, as you point out in your question, in particular in neighboring countries. But you're anticipating a little bit, I think, on the press conference of tomorrow. I don't think that it's so much a question for us of coming out before any single member state has actually announced decisions in this area or not. As a matter of fact, we will be discussing with the member states this afternoon our recommendations before they are adopted tomorrow. So therefore, we are already interacting with them at a very early stage, and the President and my colleagues who will be doing the technical briefing tomorrow will be able to provide you with more detail on this. In terms of recommending groups of member states to move forward or not, I think that the situation between the US and the EU is definitely very different because the structure, the institutional structure between the European Union on the one hand and the United States on the other is clearly very, very different. What we have always said is that in particular, cross-border regions need to take into account, for very obvious reasons, the situation just across the border if they want their measures to be effective. I think this is simply an obvious comment, a no-nonsense comment, and our guidelines, our recommendations, obviously will include some language on that. Okay, so I now see. So are there any other questions? If anybody else wants to add a question on this, I would ask you to push the raise your hand button now. I see that David Hergenhorn has his hand raised, so let's pass David the floor. David, you have the floor.
Thanks, Eric. Can you hear me okay?
I can't see you, but I can hear you. Yeah, go ahead.
Perfect, and thanks so much for bringing this interactivity back to the midday, which is much appreciated. Just following up, we've seen some guidance from the WHO suggesting that it may be too soon for countries to be considering the various measures that are in place, and yet we do see some member states, as Dave's question indicated, Spain preparing to allow certain categories of workers back to factories, etc. So from the Commission's perspective, is this too soon? Is it premature? Are you, as the President, urging member states as she talks to leaders to hold off on taking any steps until there's clearer agreement on the guidelines and also some scientific evidence that in fact the numbers of cases are declining in such a way as the epidemiologists would suggest makes it safe to ease the restrictions?
What we have always said, David, is that everyone needs to acknowledge that the specific situation, stage of the pandemic varies from member state to member state at any point in time. And therefore, it is up to the member state authorities, based on the best information that they have at their disposal on the situation in their country, to come forward with the decisions that they see as being most adequate. We will be making recommendations as to what we believe are the main criteria which member states should use when they are taking these decisions. And I've had the opportunity of mentioning some of these in broad brush in previous midday briefings. But we've also said that clearly they need to take into account the situation in other countries if they want these to be effective. But we are not going to be saying to any specific member state, this is now the right point in time for you to start taking measures to ease the restrictions that you have in place. This is really a decision for member states. What we are going to be recommending is a series of criteria and conditions that we think should apply when assessing and ultimately deciding whether it makes sense to start to ease the measures. Ooh, you need to mute your mic because I can hear you typing your article right there. That's really pleasing to know that immediately, you know, my words are being transcribed. So, excellent. On this issue, do I have more questions? I see Sander. I can't see the full name on my screen yet, so Sander, go ahead. If you could present yourself, because I'm not quite sure who I'm talking to every single time.
Theoretically, you could even see me. I don't know if that works. I don't even know if the audio works. You can hear me?
Yes, it's a bit.
Okay, great. Thank you for this opportunity to be interactive on this.
Sorry, could you present your media? Sorry.
Yeah, NOS Television from the Netherlands.
Ah, yes, thanks.
The full name is Sander van Horen, by the way. So not to take too much time, following up on the easing of the measures, I guess something the EU will want to say something about while recognizing the member states' authority is the closure of borders. So to what extent are you going to recommend the opening of borders? And is that something that you can be more aggressive on?
Look, I think we have to wait for tomorrow until the recommendations have been adopted. I cannot go through all of the different issues today since we are going to adopt the recommendations tomorrow, and there will be a presentation in detail on this in the context, in particular, of the technical briefing. What I can say is that since the outbreak of this crisis, we have been very clear that whereas we understand the need for member states to take restrictive measures in order to protect the health of their citizens, they needed to make sure that borders remained open for example, goods, in particular those which are related to either our daily needs, obviously, to keep our supermarket shelves stocked, or for the health system, or components for industry that is actually producing some of the equipment that we need. And more generally, in order to keep the economy working as much as possible despite the very difficult circumstances that we face. Likewise, we've said that borders should remain open for cross-border workers who very often work in the health system of a neighboring country. So quite clearly, we've never said that borders should be entirely closed. On the contrary, and there is absolutely no reason why that line should change tomorrow. Okay, I now have a question from. Well, I see that Sahan has raised her hand. I don't know if it's on this. Sahan, if you could present your media and the topic you want to discuss.
Good afternoon, everybody. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you, Sahan. If you could present your media, please.
Yes, my name is Sahan Aboukalub. I'm from Belgium, but I'm representing Newswire now from the UK.
Okay, we cannot hear you very well, but let's see.
I want to ask what are the measurements that the member states are taking in order to control, to control the flow of immigrants in light of coronavirus?
Well, what the European Union has decided is to restrict the entry into the Schengen area, the wider Schengen area, and the EU countries that are not part of Schengen temporarily, in order to ensure that we limit the scope of traveling that is taking place from outside the European Union to the European Union, so that travelers who would be coming from outside do not run the risk of being infected, or if indeed they themselves are carrying the virus, that they do not contribute to the spread of the virus. And last week, we proposed to prolong this temporary restriction for access until, if I remember well, the 15th of May. Okay. Now, I see that there are more and more people raising their hand. This is very good. Let me see. So, are there any other questions on the entry ban to the European Union? So anybody who wants to ask a question on something else should stop raising their hand. And anybody who still has a question on this should keep their hand raised. Good, it's working. I see hands disappearing, which is good. I still see some hands raised, so we will see if Athanasios has a question on this. Athanasios, if your question is on something else, I will take back the floor and come back to you once we have finished with this issue of the temporary entry ban. Go ahead, Athanasios.
It is on this, it is on the temporary entry ban, and it's on the angle that has to do with migration, because I read today in Die Welt that Erdogan is still pushing migrants to the coastline with Greece. So no matter a formal decision for an entry ban, there is going to be some pressure that's now also health related. What are you going to do with that? Thanks.
Okay, I pass.
Hi, Athanasios. I'm sorry, I don't really know where to look. I'll look there.
Look at your colleagues.
Okay, very good. Look, for the moment, I do not have any specific comment to make about these press reports. We will need to look into this in more detail in order to be able to comment on the up-to-the-minute situation on the Greek-Turkish border.
Yeah, but we can say in general.
Yeah, in general, I don't think I've. I mean, we can always, of course, refer to the specific conditions that we put in our recommendation on the travel restriction to the EU. We recommended to member states, which is also what they agreed, that any non-essential travel to the EU is stopped. That there is a number of exceptions to this rule, which includes specifically everybody who has an essential reason to travel to the EU, for example, of course, EU citizens and EU residents, as well as a number of other people. And of course, as regards the specific situation at the Greek-Turkish border, we have numerous times expressed our support to Greece in managing this extremely difficult situation. And we've also provided a very extensive practical support to the Greek authorities, including through financing from the EU, as well as through practical support through the EU agencies.
Okay, very good. Athanasios, I think you have a follow-up, if I see correctly. No. Hold on. So I have a question from David, I suppose, David Carretta, I suppose, on the same issue. David, can you hear us?
Vous m'entendez?
Oui, très bien.
Oui, bonjour et merci pour cette innovation importante pour nous. C'est à propos de l'annonce qu'ont fait l'Italie et Malte, selon laquelle leurs ports ne sont plus des ports sûrs et donc de facto, on ne peut plus avoir des sauvetages de gens en mer, dont des migrants entre la Libye et l'Europe. Est-ce que vous jugez ça correct, légal et proportionné par rapport aux autres mesures que vous avez annoncées? Merci.
Merci David. Il n'est pas dans la compétence de la Commission d'indiquer, enfin d'avoir des opinions sur la question des ports sûrs ou pas sûrs, d'indiquer des places de désembarcation de personnes qui sont sauvées en mer. Et donc nous ne sommes pas vraiment en position de donner un commentaire juridique sur ces cas particuliers. Nous sommes totalement conscients de la situation extrêmement difficile à laquelle sont confrontés à la fois Malte et Italie en termes de manque de capacité à la fois en termes de système de santé et en termes de personnel. Et donc, par conséquent, nous sommes conscients que les États membres sont actuellement en contact les uns avec les autres pour trouver des solutions à cette situation exceptionnelle. Nous encourageons les États membres à continuer à travailler ensemble dans un esprit de solidarité pour trouver des solutions, et nous sommes prêts à fournir de l'assistance si nécessaire.
Ok, merci beaucoup. Y a-t-il d'autres questions pour Adalbert? Je vois Marco Bressolin qui a sa main, donc je suppose que c'est pour Adalbert, donc on lui passe la parole. Marco, et je vous incite à connecter vos caméras, ça rend la chose pour nous un peu plus facile aussi pour vous suivre. Marco, can you hear us?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Marco.
Yes, it's more or less on the same subject, but maybe on external action side. The Maltese government is calling for urgent action in Libya to avoid humanitarian disaster. The Maltese government said that sent a letter to the High Representative Joseph Borrell. I'm wondering what the EU, the Commission is planning to do in order to face the situation on the ground. Thank you.
Marco?
Sorry? Marco, yeah.
Marco. Hi, Marco. Thank you for this question. At this stage, indeed, I can confirm that we received this letter. And as always, when we receive a letter from a foreign minister from a member state, we will give it due consideration and then reply in an appropriate way. But just to underline that Libya and the situation in Libya is one of the continuous problems on the mind of High Representative Borrell, and he keeps stressing and repeating that we really need to do urgently something to solve the situation. And one concrete result of it is the Operation Irini.
Okay, very good. Are there? I see that Marco has asked for a follow-up. So, no. Well, I see him in my. I see Stephen Erlanger. Okay, I suppose it's a follow-up or a question for Peter. Stephen, you have the floor. If I can ask everybody to present their media just so that other attendees can know who is asking the question, that would be very nice. Thank you.
Yeah,
Stephen.
Sorry to keep asking.
Go ahead, Stephen. You're muting yourself. Push again. Or should you push, Jonathan? Okay, go. You have the floor.
Can you hear me now? Yes. Okay,
Yes.
fine. I'm sorry to be out of order, but I was very struck by Commission Vice President talking to the FT, Dubravka Sucic, I'm sure I'm mispronouncing her name, when she was talking about the conference on the future of Europe, and she said that the Spitzencandidate system was not anymore interesting for a conversation on the future of Europe. And I'm curious, given the shambles of the last Spitzencandidate system, which ended up with a commission president who was not even in the running, whether you agree that this is a topic that is not of interest for the future of Europe conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. But as I've clearly said at the beginning of this, we are going to take the subjects by issue in order for us to be able to broadcast on EBS the clips related to a specific theme, which are useful for journalists after the midday briefing. So we keep your question and we will come back to it perhaps in a few seconds. But first, I want to check whether there is somebody who has a question for Peter on external affairs in general. And I'll give it a few seconds to see whether anybody is raising their hand. Frédéric Roard, I see. Yes, go ahead, Frédéric.
Bonjour, Frédéric Roard de l'Écho. Vous m'entendez?
Oui, c'est sur les questions affaires étrangères?
Je pense oui, ça concerne les dettes africaines. L'Union africaine a demandé aux grandes institutions internationales comme le G20, mais aussi à l'Union européenne spécifiquement, un plan de soutien économique pour l'Afrique, incluant, je cite, un moratoire sur les dettes et les intérêts. Hier, le président français Emmanuel Macron a annoncé son intention d'annuler massivement des dettes africaines. Je me demandais dans quelle mesure il y avait au niveau européen et spécifiquement au niveau de la Commission des discussions sur une coordination sur l'aide africaine, ou une réponse en tout cas à apporter à cette demande faite par l'Union africaine.
Ok, alors on va demander à Anna plutôt de répondre à cette question affaires extérieures. Anna, nous sommes devenus une paperless commission.
I'm on it.
Ok.
Merci beaucoup pour la question. On a eu déjà l'opportunité d'y parler là-dessus la semaine passée. C'est ce que c'est très clair, c'est que les nécessités publiques de financement vont être beaucoup plus larges dans les prochaines semaines et mois à l'avenir dans les pays en développement à cause de l'impact de le coronavirus. Et vous savez que il y a eu une appellation conjointe du Fonds monétaire international et aussi de la Banque mondiale pour faire une dette moratoire, moratoire de la dette. Et on a déjà dit que l'Union européenne soutient cette approche globale et une réponse coordonnée à niveau international dans ce sens-là. C'est clair aussi qu'on a dit qu'il va falloir un peu plus de temps pour analyser l'impact de la crise et les nécessités précises de financement de chaque pays. Donc voilà, on soutient l'effort coordonné à niveau global. Pour l'instant, je pense que c'est ce qu'on peut dire. Et c'est aussi très clair que le nouvel prête dans des termes très avantageux. On devrait le faire dans le framework, dans le marque de la Banque mondiale et aussi de le Fonds monétaire international pour garantir précisément la soutenabilité de la dette.
Parfait, merci beaucoup. Y a-t-il d'autres questions affaires extérieures pour Anna? Alors Frédéric, non, je ne vois pas Yannis sur mon écran pour le moment. Tu l'as mis. Alors, j'ai Stéphane Israël. On va passer la parole à Stéphane Israël. Non, il a disparu de nouveau. Il a disparu de la liste, pardon. Alors, j'ai Griselda Pastor.
Je ne sais pas si vous m'entendez.
Oui. Griselda, on t'entend, bonjour.
Oui, d'accord. J'ai mis la vidéo, si ça marche aussi.
On serait ravis de te voir.
Oui, ça marche. D'accord, écoute, moi aussi, bonjour à tout le monde et merci beaucoup Eric pour ce nouveau système. Écoute, ma question c'est sur le budget. En fait, comme tu sais, les conseils, je peux
Griselda, comme tu le sais, on va revenir alors à ta question ultérieurement. Je veux d'abord terminer avec les questions affaires étrangères. Et une fois que les questions affaires étrangères ont été traitées, on a une question sur la conférence sur l'avenir de l'Europe et ensuite on pourra venir aux questions sur le budget. Désolé, on trouve notre rythme. Merci. À tout de suite. Alors, je vois que Virginie Malingre a levé la main, a demandé la parole. Donc, on va supposer que c'est sur les questions affaires étrangères. Virginie, bonjour. Non ? Non. Attends, Griselda, il faudrait que tu coupes ton microphone, s'il te plaît.
Pardon.
Merci. Virginie, ce n'est pas sur les questions affaires étrangères.
Et alors, par ailleurs, non, mais j'essaie de comprendre comment ça marche. Ah oui, alors voilà, ça c'est la caméra. Si je fais ça, okay.
Si tu...
Bon, non, c'est sur le Green Deal, donc je reviens plus tard.
Tu reviens plus tard, absolument. Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
Ok, très bien. Parfait, j'ai l'impression d'être un présentateur télé qui a des problèmes avec le direct dans différentes parties du monde. Nous étions à Tarragone, maintenant nous sommes à Bruxelles. Je ne vois pas d'autres questions affaires étrangères. Donc nous allons revenir à la question de Stephen sur la conférence sur l'avenir de l'Europe. Stephen, what I can, if you're still with us, I suppose you are, what I can say on this is that the views which were expressed are personal comments that were made by Mrs. Suiza in the context of an interview. They do not clearly engage the Commission or represent the Commission's view at this stage. What we can say is that obviously at the moment it is clear that all of the European institutions are very much focused on dealing with the current crisis that everybody is facing. We have also said that there will come a time when we will need to reflect on the lessons to be learned from this crisis, and clearly in that context, for sure, the conference on the future of Europe will be a useful element in that debate. Ok, non, je ne vois pas Ioannis, non, il n'est pas dans ma liste. So, Griselda, nous allons maintenant revenir à ta question sur le budget. Si tu veux te... Donc, il faut que tu appuies de nouveau sur le bouton Raise Hand. Ah voilà, ça y est, tu as la parole, vas-y.
Ça va, merci beaucoup. Ok, merci beaucoup. Donc, c'était sur le budget. Et je disais que, comme tu sais, le Conseil des chefs de gouvernement est le 24 avril. Donc, j'aimerais savoir exactement qu'est-ce que la Commission pourra mettre sur la table pour ce jour-là. Et si c'est un débat que vous allez ouvrir demain aussi. J'ai lu, je crois, sur Le Pays ce week-end que la Commission envisageait de doubler, donc de mener le budget au 10% du PIB européen. Vous êtes en train de travailler sur cette ligne et c'est avec ou sans le plan le recovery plan?
Alors, premièrement, demain, il n'y a pas de réunion du collège. Donc, quand tu dis ouvrir un débat demain, demain, comme il n'y a pas de réunion du collège, il n'y aura pas de discussion sur ce point. Nous avons maintenant effectivement une ligne d'horizon, une première ligne d'horizon, qui est la réunion par vidéoconférence des chefs d'État ou de gouvernement. Et dans ce contexte-là, bien entendu, la Commission, en partenariat avec le Conseil européen, aura certainement l'occasion de présenter les grandes lignes de sa réflexion en ce qui concerne le plan de relance. Mais il est trop tôt pour dire maintenant ce que nous mettrons exactement sur la table. Demain, la présidente de la commission sera ici en salle de presse et donc elle aura certainement l'opportunité de t'exprimer le fond de sa pensée plus précisément. Voilà pour la réponse pour le moment. Merci. Nous allons passer maintenant à Virginie, qui avait demandé la parole. Un instant, Virginie, que l'on te retrouve. Virginie, est-ce que tu pourrais réappuyer sur Raise Hand pour que... Ah, elle s'est déconnectée. D'accord. Alors, dans l'attente de voir si elle se reconnecte, je vois encore d'autres questions. Je vais prendre Giorgio Leali. Giorgio.
Hello. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes. Could you please specify which media you work for again?
I work for Politico Europe.
Okay.
Yeah. So thank you very much for this. I have a question about the extension of the existing state aid framework. So as Ariana said at the beginning of the press conference, the new extension has been sent to member states for a consultation.
Yeah, don't speak too quickly because we're having a bit of a hard time hearing you. Speak slowly, please.
Sorry, I will speak. Okay, so my question is the following. When is the deadline for consultation? I think it was today. So when we can expect the extension of the framework to be adopted?
When can the extension of the framework, when can we expect the extension of the framework to be adopted? Okay.
Yes. I have a second question always on this same topic.
Okay.
You can.
Go ahead.
So the question is, yeah, so this new extension will also apply to nationalization or only to recapitalization of companies? So just to understand if the purchase of shares of companies, like for instance Alitalia by the states, will it fall outside of state rules, which I understand it's the case, or it will be part of this new framework? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Giorgio. Ariana, we're going to give you the floor. You should already have it. Yes, go ahead.
Hear me? Okay.
Yes.
So concerning the first question, what I can tell you is that the Commission aims to have the amendment in place already this week. Of course, we're going to assess the comments by member states, and therefore timing cannot be fully confirmed, but the aim is to have it in place this week. Concerning the second question, well, the consultation is on equity injections in companies. I won't comment, of course, on specific cases, but what I will say is that this recapitalization possibility on which we are consulting member states and which might be included in the temporary framework complements the possibility of member states to purchase existing shares of companies at market price. So the so-called pari passu terms with private shareholders. And if that was indeed the case, this would fall in principle outside the scope of state control.
Okay, thank you very much, Ariana. Do we have more questions for Ariana? I see Krzysztof. I suppose it is on competition. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Eric. Krzysztof Rostrzemka, Polish Press Agency. The question to Ariana, is European Commission going to change its stance when it comes to the mergers? Yeah, we have some cases in the pipeline in Poland, and there were statement of objections from the Commission when it comes to the Lotos and Orlen merger. So I was wondering whether this situation brings us to a new approach from the Commission. Thank you very much.
Sorry, I'm not sure I fully grasped the question. I'll try to reply. So indeed, the Commission has sent a statement of objection on the PKN early on in the context of the assessment of the proposed transaction of Lotus. The investigation is ongoing, and the deadline for the Commission to take a decision is 30th of June this year. In general, on mergers, I mean, our policy remains unchanged. What is indeed happening is that we have encouraged companies to submit electronic notifications and to delay notifications of mergers when possible. Of course, it is more complicated under the current circumstances, both for the Commission to operate at full speed and for the companies to also provide the necessary information, so, and to the market as well. So this is a bit the situation. I'm not sure if I answered the question. I hope so.
All right. Do we have more questions for Arianna? So I see Samuel Stolten. Samuel, is it on competition? You have the floor. Go ahead, you can speak.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. So I've just got a question for Johannes, actually on digital. So I see that the Corona response team discussed digital solutions for contact tracing apps. Just wondered if there was any update in this area and whether you could give us an insight into the toolbox that's meant to be published tomorrow.
Yeah, Samuel, as I was saying, I was calling for questions first for Arianna. So we park your question, but we will come back to it. Let's see if there are other questions for Arianna. Georgi, is your question on competition?
Actually, it's on internal market.
So it's not in competition. So I do not see other questions on competition. So Sam, we come back to you. Apologies for that. So your question was on tracing apps. Johannes, I think you heard the question. You have the floor.
Thank you, Eric, and hello, Samuel. So on your question, you saw the recommendation we issued last Wednesday. It calls for the toolbox to be discussed with member states until tomorrow. So I cannot now tell you what will happen tomorrow. But in the recommendation that we published last Wednesday, and also in the press release which we issued, you find the criteria which we set out in terms of apps to be used voluntarily, in terms of the full respect of the GDPR and privacy legislation that we have in place. So this you find there. Also in terms of data retention for how long you keep the data and so on. So all this is in the recommendation already. And so I invite you to check this out. Then on the initiative that we launched together with telecom operators, also this is part of the toolbox, part of the recommendation. There I can update you. Last Wednesday, just before the Easter break, the Commission sent letters to 19 operators. So to formalize the exchanges that were taking place already with them, the discussions that we had with them, there's a lot of interest. So this is, so as I said, to formalize now the cooperation, and then we expect the data to be transferred very shortly after the formal signature of these letters. Happy to provide you more information on background and writing after this.
Okay, very good. Any other questions since we're on the issue of apps for Johannes? Michael Schneider, or Michael, I don't see the full name. Michael, is it on, you have the floor, is it on the tracing app?
Yes, it is.
Okay, go ahead.
Michael Schneider from German Public Radio RD. Just a follow-up question concerning those apps. We have seen already discussions or solutions from member states. So just to clarify, clarify, I'd be interested. The question is the EU solution, will it be a standalone solution or will it in some form communicate with what the countries, the member states have implemented already? How is the Commission's view on this?
What we, hello Michael, what we put forward is a recommendation how these national apps should look like, how they, what are the standards they should respect. And we invited the member states to discuss together with the Commission a toolbox, and that's for tomorrow. And then this will also be accompanied by guidance on GDPR respect. So this is not an EU app that we put forward. It's basically a set of, I mean, as the toolbox says, a set of criteria which guides member states and developers how to actually develop the app. I hope I responded to your question there. There was a second question that you were asked. I'm just to find it back in my
Question actually about standalone solution or a combined solution. So I think that's.
Yeah, no, sorry. There was one aspect that I would like to mention is the aspect of interoperability. So the idea is on the one hand that all these apps respect the standards, but also that they communicate to each other, and the data can be exchanged between the apps. So, but this is also in the recommendation. So the idea is that, of course, you will not have an EU standalone solution, but the idea is that the national solutions talk to each other.
Okay, very good. I see that David Carretta has asked for the floor. I suspect it's on this same issue. David, you have the floor.
Oui, je voulais savoir, merci encore, je voulais savoir les raisons exactes pour lesquelles vous n'allez pas promouvoir une application européenne. Je veux dire, dans le programme de la Commission, la digitale, elle a été la deuxième priorité avec le Green Deal. Et alors, je me demande pourquoi, du moment où on a un commissaire européen qui est autant compétent dans cette matière au marché, qui est responsable du marché intérieur, et vu qu'il y a un problème de frontières, etc., de standards différents entre États membres, pourquoi ne pas promouvoir juste une application pour tout le monde qui respecte tous les standards prévus sur la protection des données, etc. Merci.
Johannes.
Merci David. Je ne peux pas trop te dire pourquoi on n'a pas fait quelque chose. Je peux te dire qu'est-ce qu'on a fait et qu'est-ce qu'on fait. Je ne pense pas qu'il sera utile d'ajouter des applications sur le marché ou qui sont en train d'être déjà développées. L'approche que la Commission a choisie, c'est une approche qui, si tu veux, comparable à la 5G. Aussi, de discuter avec les États membres une boîte utile qui définit bien les lignes droites, gauche à respecter. Mais ce n'est pas maintenant à la Commission de développer une app dans un moment où il y a déjà des solutions qui sont en train d'être développées. Donc là, je pense l'intérêt commun de nous tous, c'est d'avoir des applications opérationnelles assez rapidement, qui sont proposées à l'échelle nationale. Il y a aussi d'autres applications, par exemple une qui est proposée par des chercheurs à l'échelle européenne. Donc il y a déjà des solutions qui se prêtent à être publiées, être finalisées. Et donc notre approche, c'est de guider ces processus et avec deux objectifs. D'un côté, de bien respecter les standards qu'il faut respecter. Deuxième objectif, de faire les applications, de leur permettre de communiquer entre eux et en même temps d'avoir ces applications sur le marché le plus rapidement que possible.
Parfait. Merci beaucoup. Alors, je voudrais revenir à la question que Georgi voulait poser sur le marché intérieur. On va essayer de voir. Il est déconnecté? Non.
Vous m'écoutez? Vous m'entendez bien?
On t'entend, Georgi.
Ok, bon. Alors, ma question, elle porte sur le pays que je connais le mieux, la Bulgarie, mais ça devrait être intéressant aussi dans des situations pareilles dans d'autres pays. Il y a des idées de donner la priorité aux produits naturels locaux et bulgares par rapport aux produits importés, même s'il s'agit de produits importés de l'Union européenne. Et donc, ça n'a pas l'air d'être très compatible avec le marché intérieur. Et je me pose la question, est-ce que les situations d'urgence dans les divers pays permettent à entraver sur le marché intérieur?
D'accord. Peut-être la première chose à dire, Georgi, avant que je ne passe la parole à Sonia, c'est que nous ne réagissons généralement pas sur des idées, mais sur des faits, sur des actes qui ont été déjà adoptés ou qui sont en cours d'adoption. Donc, parce que les idées, il en circule toujours beaucoup dans les différents États membres, mais Sonia va peut-être pouvoir nous rappeler un petit peu le cadre général.
Oui, bonjour Georgi, et merci pour ta question. En effet, on est au courant de ces idées, de mesures particulières que tu as mentionnées, des rapports des médias. D'après ma connaissance, on n'était pas notifié d'une telle mesure ou des projets de mesures par les autorités bulgares. Alors, il faut attendre pour voir si, en effet, il y a des mesures concrètes. Mais en général, ce que je peux dire est que le principe de libre circulation des marchandises s'applique et un État membre ne peut pas, en général, discriminer entre des produits domestiques et des produits qui sont manufacturés, qui sont faits dans un autre État membre.
Très bien, merci beaucoup. Je vois des questions. Alors, je vois une question de Maria Udrescu. Maria.
Bonjour, vous m'entendez?
Oui, tout à fait.
Bonjour, merci beaucoup. Je ne sais pas si vous me voyez. Oui.
On va voir. Oui, très bien, parfait.
J'avais une question au sujet de la Pologne et donc de l'état de droit. Donc, la semaine dernière, la Cour de justice a demandé la suspension du fonctionnement de la chambre disciplinaire de la Cour suprême, une décision que 2 de vos commissaires ont par ailleurs saluée, sauf qu'en fait, on voit que cette chambre a réagi en demandant au tribunal constitutionnel d'évaluer cette ordonnance de la Cour de justice de l'UE. Donc, non seulement la chambre disciplinaire est toujours en activité, mais en plus, elle semble contester la justice européenne. Donc, ma question, c'est 1, est-ce qu'elle peut faire cela? Et 2, qu'est-ce que la Commission entend et peut faire face à cette situation? Merci.
Adalbert. Christiane Wiegand est en congé cette semaine, donc Adalbert va répondre.
En effet, bonjour. Bonjour Maria. J'ai le plaisir de remplacer Christian aujourd'hui et j'ai aussi le plaisir de devoir interpréter une ligne en anglais en français, donc excusez-moi si mon français est un peu vacillant. Mais donc là, ce qu'a dit la Cour de justice est obligatoire pour les États membres. C'est quelque chose qui prend un effet immédiat, qui doit être mis en œuvre par l'État membre concerné. La nature juridiquement contraignante de ce que dit la Cour de justice ne peut pas être questionnée sur la base de constitution nationale, droit national ou sur la base de ce que disent les cours nationales.
Merci Adalbert, merci Maria. Alors je voudrais revenir maintenant à Ioannis qui aurait une question migration pour toi Adalbert, si nous arrivons à le connecter. Ioannis. Hello. We cannot hear you, Ioannis.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Good.
Hi. Sorry, I've been having some technical issues. I wanted to ask about the Commission's proposal for the comprehensive EU migration and asylum pact. We were told in March that will be presented after Easter. And also relatedly, whether there is any update on the discussions with Turkey under the auspices of High Representative Borrell and Foreign Minister Çavuşoğlu about the assessment of the EU-Turkey deal. Thank you.
Okay, so Adalbert will answer the first part of your question and Peter the second.
That's correct, and I have to say I don't have anything new to say about the first part of the question. It's actually a question that I replied to at the very last midday briefing before the Easter break. So we're of course remain very much committed to delivering on all the measures contained in the Commission work program. However, we have to also take into account the extraordinary situation under which we find ourselves. So for the moment, I don't have anything specific to announce in terms of timing of the new pact on migration and asylum. However, please do not interpret this as an announcement of a delay. It is simply that for the moment, I do not have anything specific to say. And I will leave Peter now to take over.
Yes, merci Albert. Peter.
So if I got your question right, you were asking about the update on the EU-Turkey statement assessment. So this work and this process is still ongoing. There are regular contacts between experts on both sides and also between High Representative Borrell and Foreign Minister Çavuşoğlu. They spoke together last time, I think, at the start of this month, and they agreed that they will be in touch next also to assess how the work is continuing. So basically, short answer is the process is still ongoing and the experts are working on delivering on the task which were given to them from the highest political level.
Okay, very good. If it's still on this issue, I have Mose. If it's on this issue. Mose, can you hear us?
Yes, Eric, thank you. No, can I come back to the first issue about the coronavirus crisis?
No, then hold on. We will take your question. Just hold that and let's see if there are other questions on this issue. I see Georgi has raised his hand. Georgi, is it on this?
Yes, it's on this. Actually, maybe it's more for Adalbert, but I'm reading disturbing reports in the Greek press that Turkey is sending to Greece or helping send to Greece migrants who apparently have the coronavirus. I would like to know if the Commission is aware of such a trend of Turkey sending in migrants who have the coronavirus.
No, I don't think that we have anything to comment on something that you have just read in a report. At this stage, we have no comment to make on that. We're not aware of that. Okay, let's come back to Moses' question then. Mose, you have, hold on. Yeah, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Yes, in the beginning, we asked about the Commission's exit strategy, so its guidelines tomorrow. And one issue I wonder is about testing and tracing, because I think that there have not been enough of them in the member states, partly because there was a lack of test kits in the beginning. So it's quite difficult, I suppose, to cancel lockdown measures as long as there haven't been enough testing and tracing. So I wonder if the Commission is following or assessing this in the member states. And another connected question also is if the Commission is worried about the figures we have seen from some member states, namely that up to half of the fatalities of people who have died from the virus are elderly people in retirement or care homes, which apparently have not been tested, nor have they been sent to the hospitals for any treatment. Is this something which you're also trying to, say, to follow or assess? Okay, that's my question.
Okay, thank you very much. Look, as I said earlier, you'll have to wait now for the events tomorrow in order to have more specific details on what it is that we will be presenting in our recommendations. But I think it's pretty clear that, as I have said in the past days, one of the criteria that we believe is important, and it's so obvious that it has to be there, is the capacity of the health system to cope with the pandemic. So in that context, obviously, having all of the necessary equipment is definitely something that member states, I'm sure, will be keeping in mind. And as to whether we are looking at the figures of the deceased in retirement homes as opposed to just hospitals, clearly the Commission, as every public actor, is following the situation globally. Let me remind you that it is the responsibility of the member states to record, register, and communicate on the number of deaths in the context of the pandemic. But clearly, we are following the situation globally, and therefore take into account the fact that you have specific situations that need to be dealt with, and that retirement homes is one of them. Okay, I have, if it is on this, I have Tanya Milewska. Tanya, we're going to give you the floor. Yes, you have the floor, Tanya.
Yes, it's not on this. Can you hear me?
Yes, it's not on this?
It's not on this.
Okay.
So if you want me to come back later.
Yes, but I don't see anybody else asking for the floor. Can you remind us your media, Tanya?
Yes, I'm from the Macedonian News Agency. I have a question for Daniel, actually.
Yes. Okay, very good. Which
it's
Daniel?
About the exemptions, Daniel Rosario.
Okay.
It's about the exemptions for the Western Balkans on export of the authorizations for export of medical equipment. It was reported in some Macedonian media over the weekend that the Western Balkans, or at least North Macedonia, I don't know, would be included in the exemptions, just as EFTA countries. So I wanted to know if Daniel can confirm this.
Okay. Daniel, you have the floor.
What I can say regarding this issue is that this is a measure, a temporary measure that was applied by the Commission in March, and it's expected to stay in place until the 25th of April. It's a system, an export authorization system for personal protective equipment that will be in place and will have to evolve according to the situation on the ground. So over the last days, the Commission has been in touch with several member states, and based on that input, we are now adjusting some of the elements of the export authorization system. One of the elements to be adjusted is about the type of equipment that is subject to a prior authorization. We should have fewer products covered by this system. Another element is the geographical scope of the measure, especially what non-European Union countries are covered by it. The Commission received a letter from several Western Balkan countries regarding this issue, and what I can say is that this is a point that was already under consideration. The Commission is very open to the argument, sees the logic in it, and we are now in the process of finalizing our proposal.
Okay, Daniel, since you have answered this question, I think there is a relatively similar question from Nikola Radicic, which we received in writing, and which I would like to read out. Did the Commission receive a letter sent from the foreign ministers of 6 Western Balkan countries with a request to exempt Albania, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Kosovo, Montenegro, North Macedonia, and Serbia from the EU export restrictions on medical protective equipment, sent to Josep Borrell, Phil Hogan, and Oliver Varhelyi, Will it be discussed and when, or have some decisions regarding that issue already been made?
Well, I phrased the answer to the first question in a way as to cover also Nicola's question. Indeed, we received the letter. The Commission sees the logic in the argument exposed by these countries. This is something that was already under consideration in the framework of the ongoing discussion to review the existing authorization.
First technical issue. Okay, we have lost Daniel, but I think indeed that the answer had already been partially, if not completely, provided before. Nicolas, for you, you can take the answer to the first question. We lost you there for a short while, Daniel, but I think, as you said, you had already sufficiently framed your answer to the first question to cover also Nicolas' question. Okay, I now have one last question. It's the last question we will take today from Olivier Henrion. Olivier.
Oui, bonjour, vous m'entendez?
Oui, on vous entend. On t'entend, pardon.
Bonjour, Olivier Henrion de la RTBF. Moi, je voulais revenir sur une conséquence plutôt inattendue de la crise sanitaire, c'est celle de l'augmentation du plastique à usage unique, notamment dans le secteur des emballages alimentaires. Et je me demandais si la Commission envisageait de revenir ou d'amender le calendrier d'interdiction qui est prévu, je crois, pour le mois de juillet 2021.
Bonjour, merci beaucoup pour cette question. En fait, où nous sommes pour l'instant, c'est que la Commission, évidemment, a la position que le droit européen doit être respecté. Il inclut le droit qu'on a agréé sur le plastique à usage unique. Il faudrait dire aussi que sur la directive, on parle, comme vous avez dit vous-même, d'un délai encore plus qu'1 an pour la transposition de directive. Donc, nous avons encore de temps, ou les pays membres ont encore du temps pour prendre les mesures qu'ils doivent prendre dans leur législation nationale. Quand on parle des produits plastiques à l'usage unique, et on regarde ce qu'on a mis dans notre directive, là on voit aussi la différence entre les différentes étapes. On a dit sur 10 produits qui doivent être supprimés, mais tous ces produits sont des produits qui peuvent être qui sont échangeables avec des produits qui ne doivent pas être faits de plastique. Donc ça, c'est d'une chose. D'autre côté, nous avons aussi les limitations en ce qui concerne l'usage médical de ces produits.
Très bien, merci. Voilà, nous sommes arrivés à la fin des questions. Je vois que vous avez bien respecté les règles du jeu puisque ça fait à peu près 1 heure que nous faisons une session de questions-réponses. Nous avons eu quasiment 100 participants, donc si j'enlève l'équipe, à peu près 80 participants, journalistes qui étaient connectés. Je pense qu'on peut considérer que cette première session est un succès. Donc je voudrais, si vous le permettez, remercier mes collègues, notamment de la Direction générale informatique et notre prestataire de services, Cisco, qui nous ont aidés à mettre en place ce système ces dernières semaines. Ça a été un travail très ardu de pouvoir mettre en place un système qui puisse fonctionner comme il a fonctionné aujourd'hui. Deux petits aspects techniques peut-être que je voudrais souligner. Le premier, c'est que d'un point de vue sonore, je crois que cela marche mieux lorsque les personnes sont équipées de casques et de micros intégrés. Donc je vous recommande, dans toute la mesure du possible, d'utiliser ce genre d'équipement si vous l'avez. J'ai remarqué par ailleurs que seuls 3 d'entre vous ont osé déclencher la vidéo, Griselda, Daniel et Maria. Je ne je n'ose pas imaginer que les autres d'entre vous êtes encore en pyjama à cette heure-ci de la journée. Je voudrais simplement vous inciter, si vous le voulez bien, demain, lorsqu'il y aura la conférence de presse, à ne pas hésiter à enclencher votre vidéo. Je crois que c'est plus agréable et aussi plus facile de vous comprendre lorsque l'on vous voit en images. Donc, merci beaucoup pour votre participation à cette première conférence de presse virtuelle et interactive. Ravi de vous retrouver encore demain dans ce contexte. Et merci de nous faire part de vos commentaires sur cette première expérience afin de nous aider à nous améliorer dans les jours qui viennent. À demain.